Are who we thought they were.
Playoffs? We'll talk about playoffs.
We just talk about practice. We sitting here, I'm supposed to be the franchise player, and we're in here talking about practice.
NFL Reactions with the Sports Memery.
Team of the secondary has been really good. Here's one for Adams downfield and a catch. Touchdown. Rodgers going to air it out. There he is. Valdez-Scantling for the touchdown.
If you don't convert, pass is picked off at the 30. It's the third Buffalo takeaway today. And Tre'Davious White inside the 5.
Cutting it to the outside. Taylor keeps the legs churning. And he lost the ball. Ravens have it. Down the sideline, Chuck Clark hurdles and still going. Clark goes all the way. Touchdown, Baltimore.
Stretch. Fresh set it down. Quick delivery. And that is Brandon Cooks, and he springs free. Cooks will score. Huge territory. He's adding a nice, interesting wrinkle. Fuller on the catch, and he breaks free. Will Fuller will score. 14. Going deep, McCaffrey.
He was in COVID restriction. Here's the first down handoff and Cook. Like a bullet break. Oh, he's gone. There he goes, galloping. Chased on the play by Carson. True flop. Give him 6.
Scoreboard. And they flip it out to Montgomery, who loses the ball. It's picked up by the Titans. And it's the newcomer, Desmond King, who's going to run it in for the touchdown.
Third down and 10. Chargers bring in 4. Picked up. Carr with time. Launches for Eckler. Behind the knee for the touchdown. Murray feeling the pressure. He's in trouble. Loses the football. It's scooped up by Shaq Lawson. Lawson off to the races. And he will score.
The field where it's then juggled for a moment. And now the Cowboys are making a special teams play. Hurdling past and all the way down to about the 10-yard line. It's Goodwin. It's away from the Heat. Fires it sideline. Oh, what a catch at the 50. They'll have a chance for a heave or two. That is Lamb.
Maybe the one guy to get him started is a rookie.
Look out. And it's picked off and he's
So obviously, guys, that's the fucking story of the week. The just absolute ass-whooping, annihilation, just one-sided, just unexpected fucking match between the Saints and the Bucks. The worst loss of Tom Brady's entire career. There's really nothing else to say about it. The Bucks continue to be this up-and-down team that you really can't predict. What was your guys' take on that game? Obviously, we've memed the shit out of it.
Brandon Brister has declared the New Orleans Saints the winner of the NFC South. I say that obviously coming off the election, as I've watched so much of that over the past 7 days. But I really just mean that if you look at New Orleans' record, I mean, I hate to be hyperbolic and say that this game pretty much wrapped up the division for New Orleans, but the Saints play one more team with a winning record. The rest of their opponents have a losing record, and they play some bottom dwellers. So with the lead that they just put on Tampa Bay is now fighting for a wild card, something that Tom Brady hasn't had a lot of experience with. So hate to overreact over one game, but I think Tampa needs to seriously be concerned of their Super Bowl hopes now that the path will not go through Tampa Bay whatsoever for the 2020 playoffs.
Yeah, I don't think that's like a crazy overreaction. I think that the strength of schedule the rest of the way out is very favorable for New Orleans. And they're a team that typically does well in the back half of the season, at least recent years. They had a rough start. Drew Brees did not look good the first 3 weeks. And honestly, he looked good. He looked like Drew Brees last night, but it was nothing. His longest touchdown pass was 14 yards. So it's not like he was just slinging the ball downfield. They played a game that favored what Drew Brees needs to do and what they need to do for Drew Brees. But the Bucs offense has just looked terrible, just completely disconjointed.
Yeah, I think it's an overreaction, guys. You can't count out Brady. Come on, how many times have we counted out Brady in his career?
I'm not counting out Brady, but in order to catch them, that means New Orleans has to lose.
I know. What I'm saying is that what Brady does is he has games like this and he bounces back stronger than ever the very next week. We've seen it already multiple times this year. I still like the Bucs as a team, as a whole. Now, I think that Brady can be a liability at times, but I have faith in Brady and what he's able to do, and I really do have faith in that defense.
But Drew, here's the reality of the situation there. New Orleans is now in the driver's seat to win the number 1 seed in the bye. I think, you either got Green Bay or Seattle, who's number 2. That means Tampa Bay is going to have to go through either go visit either Philadelphia, Green Bay, or Seattle.
Right.
I think that's bad news for Tom Brady to go to any of those places on the road.
Sure, but we're talking about a completely different climate. It's not like Brady's necessarily comfortable in Tampa Bay. It's not like he's dominated in the Tampa Bay state. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like New England where in Foxborough, Brady owns that shit. It's a completely different situation. If he goes to Seattle, there's not going to be any crowds. So there's a completely different situation in the 2020. He might actually benefit from the 2020 format, where he's not going to go into these loud stadiums. But I think, home, away, I still like the Bucs' chances, man. I bet on talent, and I'm betting on the talent of that team. Now, their matchups with the Saints, and especially Bruce Arians, coaching abilities against the Saints, that's what I doubt. Because, I worry about the coaching more than anything.
So I don't want to put this on Arians. I want to put this a little bit more. I mean, offensive coordinators always get thrown under the bus, so I'm going to keep that consistent. I mean, you got to question what Leftwich is doing. He seemed to not really have a plan. It seems to differ possession to possession. There seems to be absolutely no rhythm. The chemistry with really any of the wide receivers hasn't happened. Some of that can be relying on injuries, but I mean, I think it's more of a Leftwich and a game planning thing than it might be anything Arians is doing.
Could be. Yeah,
Antonio Brown non-factor.
Yeah, though we were talking about it. I was predicting modest results. I don't know. I still have faith in that guy, and I think he's going to be just kind of a safety valve for Tom Brady, which he needs desperately. Because he's, 40, what is he, 43 or 42?
43.
43 years old. Like, it's insane. It's insane that they were ever, it's insane that we were ever excited about this team, quite frankly. Another team that continues.
He's going to be up or down.
There's no need to be excited about Antonio Brown or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the rest of the season.
Overreaction. That's what the pod is. Overreaction. But let's go ahead and overreact. Speaking of, this is a team that Brandon has not been high on. Last week during this same exact pod, Derek predicted that this team would win the division. And that prediction is looking damn good right now, although Buffalo did win again, so they didn't close the gap there at all. But the Dolphins just keep getting it done. And, they have one of these teams that they're scrappy. Their defense makes these plays. And sometimes you think that it can't keep up, but they continue to do it. What is going right for this Dolphins team, and what is the ceiling for this team?
Yeah, I'll let the Dolphins expert here chime in.
So you get Flores, who is from the Belichick tree. So you get a team that is producing in all three phases, and that's really, I think that their secret is they produce and they try to take an advantage in all three phases of the game. They're plus on special teams, they're plus on defense, and their offense has been good enough. And they make the move to Tua. Tua looks a complete 180 from last week. Obviously, last week is about as bad a performance as you could possibly have. So they come into week 9, and he looks decent. He looked really good at times. Decisive with the football. You could tell he looked more comfortable. Is the offense going to carry this team? No, but I don't think it has to. Again, I think they're a team that's going to be productive in all three phases of the game.
Yep.
And that brings
just to remind
consistency.
you, they were 4.5-point dogs. They actually started as 6-point dogs. This team, I think they thrive at the underdog role.
Yeah, and it makes you consistent when you bring it in all phases. You're not reliant on one unit to get the job done. Somebody else can pick up the slack.
Brandon, any changes to your thoughts on the Dolphins?
This team's going to go as far as the defense goes. While Tua was impressive, he was equally unimpressive last week. So I'm not going to I get to choose when I get to overreact, and I'm not going to overreact to Tua's one performance. And it was a fun game, but Tua doesn't scare me. No one on the running attack scares me. And honestly, they have pretty meh receivers in Devontae Parker and Preston Williams. So, I don't think, again, they're running out of formula that can be repeatable over a long stretch of a season. So, yeah, in my mind, they're still kind of a flash in the pan. And, they're kind of having a stretch the Carolina Panthers did. The Carolina Panthers had me all, hot and bothered thinking they were going to make the playoffs. They're 3-6. It wouldn't shock me, here in a month if, we're talking to the Dolphins and they finish 7-9 after being 8-3.
If the Dolphins make the playoffs, any doubt Brian Flores deserves Coach of the Year? Any doubt? Number 2 pick in the draft last year.
He definitely would have to be up there, but when the Steelers go 16-0, Mike Tomlin's going to win the.
Has anybody done more with less than the Miami Dolphins this year?
Probably
they
not.
are. I don't know, man. I think Brian Flores is a fine coach.
Mike Tomlin won 8 games with an aquatic animal at quarterback.
Do you remember? And you wanted him gone. Do you remember last year? Do you remember last year when people were saying that the Dolphins were the worst roster in the history of the NFL, and they were scrapping together? A lot of people were not excited about Brian Flores, by the way, myself included, by the way. I thought it was a desperate grab from the Belichick coaching tree. I didn't really think a lot of him, to be honest, mostly because I didn't really know a lot about him. Everything that I'm hearing, everything that I'm seeing about Brian Flores, I like this guy more and more every day. Another guy that I really, really like, Rule out of Carolina. And so that was another game, obviously, that took place last week. The Carolina Panthers, man, they have been another one of these scrappy teams that nobody expected anything out of. But they could have beaten the Chiefs last week.
Yeah, can I make one more point on Arizona before we jump into this game?
No way.
I think Arizona can lose to anyone and beat anyone in the NFL. In my mind, it would not surprise me if they sneak into the playoffs and absolutely upset a number 2 or number 3 seed.
I think every one of their games completely is dictated by the turnover battle because their defense is not good. It's not going to be good on consistent drives. You're going to be able to sustain a drive against them. But if they get lucky and intercept a couple balls or force a couple fumbles, they might win that game because they're not going to stop scoring.
Exactly. Yeah, you nailed it right there, Derek. If I was playing the Cardinals, if I'm the Packers or I'm the Seahawks and I'm a number 2 or 3 seed, as I just kind of laid out for Tampa Bay, I'm terrified of the Cardinals because their ceiling is so high.
But their floor is so low.
Yes,
they lost to the Lions. Honestly, they got outplayed by the Lions and they got outplayed by the Dolphins. What does that say to you about this team? To me, it says that their offense, like I've been saying it since he was hired, Cliff Kingsbury's offense, it's great for some games, but it fails ultimately. And it's going to fail hard in the playoffs. I'm telling you, it's going to fail so hard in the playoffs because gimmicky systems like that, they work out. It's kind of like, the Ravens. The Ravens, they can make Lamar Jackson look like one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play in the regular season. But when the postseason comes around, they get exposed, and I really think that's what's going to happen to the Cardinals.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I think that there's a lot of similarities between the Ravens and the Cardinals. Yeah. And I was going to talk about this later, but it makes kind of a good discussion point now. The Cardinals' success is so tied to Kyler Murray because of the way that offense operates and because they have no defense. Where if Kyler Murray has a bad game, there's nothing for them. There's no ability for them to overcome that. They don't sustain the run very well typically. And I think it's similar to the Ravens. The Ravens can run with anybody, but if they get behind, they don't have the ability like a KC or like a Pittsburgh to fight their way back to keep, to come back. Once they fall behind and they have to get one dimensional and start throwing the ball, they can't do it.
Right. Yeah.
It's still must-see TV. Right now, Arizona Cardinals, and a non-biased opinion, are the most fun team to watch on a week-in or week-out basis, because you're either going to see them absolutely implode or absolutely explode.
The Bucks are very similar to that. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, the Bucks on a week-to-week basis, you never know. It's like tuning in and just watching, like, oh, what am I going to see?
It's like when Game of Thrones was good, right? You're like, holy shit, this has the potential to be the greatest thing I've ever watched.
Anything could happen. 4 touchdowns from Brady or 4 interceptions. Anything can happen.
Exactly. Anything can happen.
Honestly, that's what the NFL has been all year. And I'm here for it.
For sure.
There are teams that just you didn't think were going to be competitive, and that's every year with the NFL. But like I was saying, Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers, can't say enough about this team. This is a team that's going to be good for a really long time, because I don't even think they have their quarterback yet. But Teddy Bridgewater, man, he's scrappy, and he's a good transition guy. So they can go out and kind of scope in the later rounds, maybe try and find like a Dak Prescott, somebody that will eventually replace Bridgewater. But man, if they can almost win these big games like against the Chiefs, that is not a talented roster at all. Like, not even a little bit of a talent.
Their offensive line, like, they're doing better than I thought they were, because their offensive line play is terrible.
Right.
And we knew that going into the season that they were going to be poor. And they're just as advertised. They're terrible. McCaffrey goes down for a long period of time. Who thought that they had anything else on that roster? For everybody that went out and scooped up Mike Davis, he kind of held down the fort. Now McCaffrey's back, or is he back? He's got a shoulder issue now. But he, coming off that injury, looked just as good as he ever has. Caught the ball out of the backfield really well. They have the right things there, and I think you're right with Teddy Bridgewater. I think he can provide a bridge to something else. Obviously, they're not too big on Will Grier, so they probably go to the draft again.
Right. So yeah, the Panthers, to me, they've lost 5 out of their 6 games by 1 score or less. Right. So in my mind, there's 2 reasons for that. It's either X's and O's or Jimmy's and Joe's. And right now, I mean, if you look at if you look at the Chargers, if you look at the Broncos, they're losing because of the X's and O's. The Carolina Panthers are losing because of the Jimmys and Joes. They just don't have the talent right now to compete. So, with this free agency, they have a lot of cap space. They're going to have good draft picks. They can definitely build their roster to be competitive next year and turn a lot of these 1-score losses into 1-score or multiple score wins.
Oh, that was your best line of the year. You've had some good ones, but that was your best line of the year. Can you say it again? Can you say it again?
See, the X's and O's.
Teams lose 1-score games for a multitude of reasons. It's either because of the X's and O's or the Jimmys and Joes.
Jimmys and Joes. The only other better one is
100%.
Yeah, every character needs an origin story. Is Barry Sanders the origin story for the Madden cover curse? I think maybe. Okay, that was Brandon's previously best line of the year, but yeah, it's very good. I get what you're saying, 100%. And
there's just a talent gap on that team that I think an off-season can solve. Ultimately, is where I was getting at. They're an off-season way of being a very competitive team, because I feel like they have the infrastructure in place. They have a capable quarterback. They have an absolute all-pro in Christian McCaffrey, and they seem to have a budding star at quarterback or at their head coach. When you have those 3 factors, you have the infrastructure to build a team that can go on a decent run.
And they have a wide receiving core that is it's outperforming what I thought it was on paper going into the season. You didn't really see a true number 1, but they haven't really needed one. They've had Samuel and Moore kind of split that load, and one of them has a huge week and is kind of the featured target depending on matchup. And I think that's sustainable. 2 number 2s can get it done sometimes.
Imagine if they still have Luke Kuechly. Last year, Luke Kuechly was all pro level. Like, man, if they still had a guy like that team could be really good right now. I don't know. And if Christian McCaffrey doesn't get hurt all year, how many games do they win? By the way, that's one of the stories of the week, fantasy-wise. Christian McCaffrey could miss multiple weeks again with a shoulder injury. I've been saying it for a while, and I've kind of expected this. He's a small frame guy, and things that start to break down on a running back and wide receiver, any guy that takes a lot of impact, are joints like ankles, shoulders. And I'm not saying this has already happened to Christian McCaffrey. I'm really not. But I am taking notice because this is something that I've been calling since the beginning. I said he was very Reggie Bush-like in his durability. Even though that wasn't the case in college, it really wasn't the case with Reggie Bush either. But in the NFL, it's a different game. I worry about Christian McCaffrey's durability going forward. Any thoughts on that?
I would be worried too.
I think it's just such a brutal position. I don't think it has anything to do with Christian McCaffrey. I just think it's the toll that position takes. I think we're going to get into this debate either today or later in the week's pod. But I think we kind of all agree that Dalvin Cook is the best running back in the league, ... when he's on the field. Again, we're talking about different kind of, you're talking about different injuries between DC and CMC. But again, it's just that it's a volatile position that I don't think stands a test of time for no matter how you run.
So
it's going to catch
something
up
I just
to you.
thought of is, so you have Mike Davis who performed well. Running back's a position where you can draft a guy late, you can bring a guy in for relatively cheap. There's not really a premium at that position today. Do you consider moving Christian McCaffrey to extend his career, move him into the slot because he's a capable receiver?
No.
Or do you just try to run it out and say, hey, we might only get 3 or 4 more years out of this guy and just milk it?
I mean, that's what his contract is, I think.
Yeah.
I think you got to put him in a position that he makes the most plays, and that's definitely running back.
Definitely.
You want to maximize potential. You don't want to risk maximizing potential for long-term benefits that still isn't promised. I think you have to maximize regardless what the shelf life is. So putting him in any position that isn't his best position isn't doing himself or yourself any services.
Yeah, and honestly,
But it's not a bad idea.
The only position you really do that at is quarterback, right? Like, and obviously I'm not talking about moving him to different things, but if you can do something for your quarterback to make him last a little bit longer, like maybe not, you see what I'm saying? Where
Yeah.
I think with other positions, if McCaffrey's explosive as a running back, you got to keep him as a running back because he wins you games that way. If it's going to take, there's no guarantee that it's going to shorten his shelf life. So I don't think you can play that based on.
No, it's just a thought because I mean, from a fan perspective, outside perspective, you kind of see the writing on the wall, and it's like, man, this guy might be out of the league in 2 years, and it's sad.
Yep.
Can the Vikings make a run of the playoffs this year?
Yes, I think I said that last week. Yeah, I 100% think they can. The backside of their schedule is not intimidating, and with the expanded playoff field, I think 10-6 is extremely possible. And I think 10-6 gets you in for sure. 9-7 might even get you in with the expanded field. And now there's a proposition that the owners have agreed to where if the regular season gets cut short for any reason, they're going to let half the league in. So I would take the bet on the Vikings making the playoffs. Absolutely.
So I'm gonna answer your question with a question, Drew. Can Kirk Cousins put a run together? Because if your answer is yes, then I think that answer is yes. I think if your answer is no, then I think your answer is no. I think Kirk Cousins is steering this ship, and I have no faith in him. So I
don't think he is steering the ship. I think
since
Dalvin came back, I think he's second seat to Dalvin. If he can complement Dalvin and throw the ball off play action, which is Kirk Cousins' strength, like let's call it what it is. His strength is off the play action. So if Dalvin is running the ball well, Kirk Cousins, you get all the benefit in the pluses of Kirk Cousins. You take away his liability if he's throwing the ball 30 times a game. If you can keep Kirk Cousins at 20 attempts or less, I guarantee the Vikings make the playoffs.
Yeah, but they had Dalvin Cook against the Colts, and look what happened. I mean, how many other games did they had Dalvin Cook against the Packers? What happened? I mean, Cousins lost them those games.
These are completely different. It's a completely different time in the season. They've since brought up rookies that have been performing on the offensive line that have made this team a completely different running team.
Yep.
So it's a completely different situation now. when Kirk Cousins put together a run? He absolutely can. He's shown that multiple times in his career. He just did last year. About 6 games in the year, people were counting the Vikings out, and then he made a run. Kirk Cousins can 100% put together, but it's not going to be on the back of Kirk Cousins if they make the playoffs. It's going to be on the back of this improved defense, which has gotten better over the season, and Dalvin Cook, who's the best running back in the NFL.
Too many ifs for me. If Dalvin can stay healthy, if Kirk can continue to play well, if those rookies don't hit a rookie wall, again, there's just too many ifs.
Look at their schedule. Like that to me is what it comes down is look at their schedule. So here's what they have left. They have Chicago twice. I think they take at least one of those. They have the Cowboys, who they're going to beat. They have the Panthers, who they'll beat. They have the Jaguars, who they'll beat. They have the Saints, who they'll probably lose to. The Lions, who they'll beat, and the Buccaneers, who, depending on what Bucs team shows up, you can't pencil it in either way there either.
So you just told me 2 definite losses and a potential third loss.
I think 2. I think they lose 2 games down the stretch.
But Dalvin Cook's injury issues are overplayed. They absolutely are. 8 games missed in the last 3 years. 8 games. The majority of those games were missed the season directly after his ACL surgery, where he encountered a lot of soft tissue issues. His injury issues are 100% overplayed. He missed 2 games last year. He's missed 1 game this year. He missed a crucial quarter in the Seattle game. That sucked. They lost because of that. But Dalvin Cook's injury issues are 100% overplayed. I mean, they've been a lot of soft tissue things, bad luck things, but they're not like knee issues like Todd Gurley has seen, or like structural issues with his body. So I think the injury issues, they really are. I think they're over exaggerated.
I think they go 6-2. I think they go 6-2 down the stretch. I think they go 6-2 down the stretch, and 9-7 gets them in an expanded field.
I can't buy in on the Vikings just because of everything that I've seen with them and Cousins. Yeah, but I don't know. It is intriguing. Their schedule is very easy down the stretch. I've looked it over. The only losses I see on there are Bucks and Saints, straight up.
So who are they getting in over, Derek? That's who you think they're going to get in over? The Rams, Cardinals, or Bucks? Because I don't think they're getting in over any 3 of those teams.
You just said like 2 weeks ago. You think they're better than the Rams?
I think the Rams are better than the Vikings. I don't think the Rams are very good, but I think they're I think the Rams are better than the Vikings. Yes,
I do not.
You just said differently just 2 weeks ago, literally. But anyways, the Bills, biggest upset of the week it wasn't an upset, but the Bills beat the Seahawks in a convincing fashion. A game that I have really not seen out of Russell Wilson maybe in his entire career. He looked fallible, and the Seahawks were letting him cook, and he was turning it over. The Seahawks, I think they turned it over 4 total times. What were you guys' thoughts on this game? To me, it took me completely by surprise. I was calling them as a big win.
I thought this was going to be a close game, just because Josh Allen needs to get going again, and he was due for kind of a bounce back week. And if you're going to bounce back throwing the ball, it's against Seattle, which is crazy to say, but they've been terrible against the pass. So I kind of expected Josh Allen to bounce back. I was not surprised. I was definitely surprised to see that this is how they lost. I mean, they lost because Russell Wilson's play, which how often have you said that in his time in the NFL? Like 2 or 3 times total, maybe.
And not since like his second year,
Exactly. So yeah. I was really surprised in how they lost. Not super surprised in the fact that they lost. I thought it was kind of a coin flip game. But man, Russell Wilson didn't look good, but he's going to bounce back. He still threw for 390 yards. The turnovers were a big problem there. Pressure was a problem. He gets sacked 5 times. He's going to bounce back. The Seahawks are going to be fine. They're still the best team in that division. There's no issues there.
Aren't players allowed to have bad weeks? I mean, we've seen Mahomes lay an egg. We've seen Brady lay an egg. We've seen Rodgers lay an egg. It was inevitable. Nobody's going to put 16 games in a row. So, and even with that, it needed to be a perfect storm. For those that listen to our gambling podcast on Sundays, this was my lock of the week.
I knew that Buffalo was going to win.
It's actually, it was my fault. I mean, honestly, put it on me. But this was it had to be a perfect storm. Russell had to play the worst game he's played all year. Josh Allen had to play his best game of the year, despite having a lot of best games. It was a perfect storm. Absolutely nothing to glean from this game. Buffalo isn't that good. Seattle isn't that bad. Next week, water will find its level.
Yeah, I actually agree with all these points.
Just Tremaine Edmonds.
I think the Seahawks defense is always going to be a liability, and it just kind of shows you what happens if Russell Wilson isn't firing on all cylinders. But when is Russell Wilson not firing on all cylinders? That's the thing. Russell Wilson is, to me, the best quarterback in the NFL right now. And it's him and Mahomes 1 and 1A. But if just regardless of age, who I'd take right now and how they're playing, I'd take Russell Wilson because Mahomes has really looked flawed at times during this year. So before we get to the Yinzer game, do want to talk about it. The Ravens looked really good against a really good defense. Phillip Rivers continues to just look terrible and a liability for the Colts. What were you guys' thoughts on that loss by the Colts this week? I mean, I feel like it was a defining win for both teams.
I thought that fumble recovery was a metaphor for Phillip Rivers' season. He's on his back, flailing, looking out of place, like he doesn't belong on a football field. And that's just really, it's sad that's where it's at. But we've all been on that page since the season started. We saw 2 years ago he started showing signs of it. Last year he looked really bad at the end of the season. He just doesn't have the arm strength anymore. His mechanics have never lend themselves to efficient, throwing of the football. So as soon as that arm strength starts to go, I mean, he's just terrible. And they have to win despite him. And they have a really talented deep roster. It sucks to see. I mean, at what point do you to turn the reins over and say, all right, Jacoby, see what you can do?
Oh, the indie media is already running Phillip Rivers out of town. They have
can't blame them.
They have completely turned on him. And I don't know what took him this long, honestly. The Ravens didn't beat the Colts. The Ravens beat Phillip Rivers. I don't know how many times us three need to say that or even belabor on it. The Colts played well. That if the Colts don't turn the ball over as many times as they did, I think the Colts win that game. I think that it's hard to say that in a pretty convincing 24-10 game. But I watched that. I watched the local game here, and I think the Colts were the better team. They were just playing with a guy absolutely going against them. So I came away less impressed with the Ravens and just really kind of the Colts need to make a change. I'm with you, Derek. Phillip Rivers isn't going to bring that team to where they're going to go. And if they want any hope, they have to make a change. They absolutely they have to.
Yeah,
it gives you more depth. Even if you go, so you plug in Jacoby Brissett right now, he's not a great passer. There's a reason why he's a backup, but at least you get the added dimension of his mobility.
He will
at least
not
that gives you something more.
He will not beat you.
No.
If Jacoby goes, let's say Jacoby goes, they're not going to throw the ball 43 times with Jacoby, like they did on Sunday. But say he goes 18 for 35. With 0 turnovers and 185 yards, I bet the score of that game is probably closer to 14-7, 17-10.
And you just took a running back in the first round.
Yeah,
put it on his shoulders.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, and I don't mean to get all Colin Cowherd on us right now, but for me, that's what the Colts are going through because Phillip Rivers is this likable guy. He really is. Like if you watch him in interviews, you watch everything that the guy does, he's really likable. And when he was good, he was really, really likable. But now it's like you're kind of like dating your best friend. You're having a good time. You're having fun together. Yeah, it is. It's a call. I'm sorry to do the Cowherd take, but you're now that you've been dating, like they're more into it than you are, and so it's like awkward. Like, do you cut it off? Like, is it going to make things weird with your friendship afterwards? Like, to me, that's what's going on with the Colts because I agree. I mean, the problem is clear in Indianapolis. It's their quarterback, and they won games last year with the backup. So to me, it's an obvious decision. I think franchise. What are they paying Philip Rivers? I think they're paying like $25 million a year this year.
25.3.
So maybe it's an ego check. I'm not really sure. To me, it's so obvious. They got to move on. They got to move on like right now. Look what the Cowboys did this week with a guy they picked up off the streets.
Yep.
Like you're telling me that Garrett Gilbert couldn't be better in Indianapolis than Philip Rivers? I 100% would take Garrett Gilbert over Philip Rivers right now. So that's how low I think of Philip Rivers. So yeah, I think it's an awkward situation with Indy, and I think there's some egos that are keeping him in play.
And we've talked about with other running backs who play with terrible quarterbacks. I think they could get the running game more just by taking Philip Rivers out because the threat to throw the ball more than 30 yards exists.
Yep.
Right? It's true.
Absolutely.
But other than that, Tennessee just absolutely annihilates Chicago. Is Chicago done? We're talking about teams that the Vikings are better than, and I think the Vikings are definitely better than Chicago, and I still don't think the Vikings are making the playoffs.
I think you just go to the Dennis Green clip with Chicago. They are who we thought they were, right?
Yeah.
Like nobody had high hopes coming into the season with Chicago. All of us saw what they were doing, and Drew, you've been the most consistent person on the Bears. Every week, they're not that good. Bears, they're not that good. Every win, you were saying they're not that good. They are who we thought they were. And Drew, you never let them off the hook.
Sad to see a team waste a generational talent's prime the way that Khalil Mack is rotting in Chicago.
Yeah, he's rotting for sure. And yes, the Chicago is done. Even when I was so down on the Vikings, I was like, this team is going to win 4 games. I was like, they'll go 2-0 against Chicago. Never had faith in this team. Nick Foles, I mean, they got a really good defense, but other than that, David Montgomery is not a good running back. Nick Foles is not a starting quarterback in this league. God bless Allen Robinson. Probably going to put up another 1,000-yard season with another dud quarterback. But, man, Matt Nagy's got to go. Matt Nagy's got to go. This team is talented enough. I don't know what the fuck happened with Nagy. He looked like a genius just 2 years ago, taking a rookie, Mitch Trubisky, to 13 wins. What happened to that team? What happened to whatever spark they had? I don't know. But you got to blame coaching at this point.
Yep. And if you know a Bears fan, just remind them that they could have had Patrick Mahomes.
They love hearing it. All
right, guys. Well, I think that's it. Any closing thoughts?
Just one thing on the Steeler game. You'd rather lose a game you play terrible in or you'd rather win a game you play terrible in than lose a game. Like everyone's free, like Pittsburgh's 8-0, but they're not the best team. Look what Seattle just did. Look at some of the games that like the Chiefs lost to the Raiders. Like look at all these teams and you can say, you're allowed to have a bad game. The fact that the Steelers played their worst game and still won told me more about the Steelers than some of their other games where they blew out teams earlier in the year. So the Steelers actually showed me a lot in their close win.
And they have the benefit of a pathetic schedule. Just
correct.
Outright. I mean, the first 8 were easy. The back 8 are easier.
Correct. Close wins, by the way, close wins, like inching past a win, very overrated to say that a team that's done that all year is not a good team. I'm telling you. A win in the NFL is a win in the NFL, regardless of who it is.
Yep.
Whether it's by 3 points against the shitty Cowboys, because when you're that team, when you're this 8-0 team, you're the only undefeated team in the league. Every team is looking at this like their Super Bowl. So the Cowboys prepared for this game. Mike McCarthy's fighting for his life. Literally, he's fighting for his fucking job.
You start seeing punt throwbacks across the field. You start seeing those kind of plays that, trust me, I've seen plenty of over the last 20 years.
There's no guarantee in the NFL, especially at the coaching position. And Mike McCarthy's fighting for his job there. So they gave everything they had at the Steelers. They caught them off guard a little bit early, and the Steelers prevailed. You can't take away from a team just because of their schedule, and they're still 8-0.
But you guys saw it all over ESPN, all over everyone.
Yeah,
like
everyone's trying to take shots at the Steelers.
Yeah, Steelers are barely a top 5 team. I would still take these 3 teams over the Steelers. Like, really, you're going to take a team that lost to the Raiders at home? You're gonna pick a team that got blown out by so and so. Like you can pick apart the other top teams in the league, and they've lost. So that was my thing about the Steelers. Like I read everything on Twitter, listened to everything on all the networks, and I couldn't disagree with him more. So I'm glad you guys are on the similar page.
I don't think there's a definitive good team in the league this year. I think there's a cluster up at the top. I don't think just because the Steelers are 8-0, they're unequivocally better than these other teams. But you can't say and put, to your point, like you can't put other teams ahead of them just because the Steelers look bad against the Cowboys. It's like, great. So what was the worst game that other team played? Who did they lose to? Because everybody else has a loss on their schedule.
Yep.
My closing remarks are, it has been a long time since I've seen a quarterback and wide receiver as in sync as Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams.
Oh,
it truly is something special. And if you have Devontae Adams in fantasy, God bless you. He is.
They've evolved like to that point where it's like prime Brady Gronk, where it's nonverbal at this point. Like they just know what's going on.
There's no stopping those guys. And if Aaron Rodgers can keep it rolling, he's had these shitty games, but man, I really do fear the Packers in the playoffs. I fear that duo, and I just man. Anyways, all right, guys, thank you so much. Have a great night.
See ya.